Thank you so much. Whoever's listening to me up in the booth, don't listen to me for a minute. I'm going to say two directly contradictory statements. One is that I'm so happy to be here and so happy to be with my fellow panelists, and I've heard them a couple of times now, and other women and men speaking here, and I feel inspired and grateful for the opportunity to take part in the conversation. Now, this is what you shouldn't listen to. My mother and Christy Brown are right over there. I can see them. Yeah, I know, it's good. Except that you can imagine how I feel right now. I'm just going to not look over there. Christy told me that I should tell my own story, my personal story, but I come from a tradition that we affectionately call the frozen chosen. So that's hard for me, but I will say a bit about why I started the Berry Center. It was certainly, I had a lot of things on my mind the couple of years before the Berry Center started. Somehow, and I'll talk more about this, it had become clear to me that after years and years and years of work and belief in something called the local food movement, that the farmers in our area were not, they had taken part, but they were not, things weren't getting better for them. In fact, we were losing farmers and farmland faster and faster and faster. I also had a marriage that ended and left the farm that I'd been on for 30-some years. And in that little period of time, my father and I had something that we had on our minds that we wanted paid attention to by the powers that be in Louisville. And who would you go talk to about something like that? Then, well, Daddy sent me to Christy and Owsley. And we talked about what Daddy and I had on our minds, and they very kindly said that they would keep our ideas being talked about. And then Christy said, well, what are you going to do? Well, I didn't know what I was going to do. And that was really the dawn of the Berry Center and the start of a new life for me. Not expecting that other people would take care of what needed to be done in rural Kentucky, but that I would join the, dare I say, fight to keep what is precious. So there you are. That was my emoting part of the talk. That's it. No more. But I did very much appreciate the Lynn Twist saying that pain pushes and vision pulls, because the pain did push me toward activism, and the vision that I had inherited from 8 generations of farmers that are my forebears in Henry County, Kentucky, gave me hope and life and so on. So, okay, now I'm really done with that piece of it. I've just got written here, enough is enough. And I think it's about something else, but I think it's a good, it's helpful. My mother, Tanya Berry, says in the documentary Look and See that a lot has been left out lately. She is talking about the way we live now as opposed to the way we could live, wholly and contentedly in our homes and communities, doing as little harm as possible to the land and the creatures and the people who live near us. My aim today is to make an argument for a land-based economy that takes everything into account, and to suggest some ways that might happen. My home is farm country in north central Kentucky. Maybe I should say that I'm going to take you all on a trip too. It's 40 miles northeast of here, but in some ways it's about as far as Morocco. I have lived and farmed there all of my life, first by birth and then by choice. My great-grandfather said after the first and only trip he ever took in his life, "I didn't see anything I liked better than the field behind my barn." I am his true heir. While I believe that it would be a mistake to have my vision confined by my home place, I am sure that my love for one place has allowed me to have a frame of reference for what has happened to rural America that is often, too often, missing in the efforts to do something about our toxic, erosive, land and people-destroying economy. I live every day with the consequences of what is happening to our countryside. While I am grateful for the traveling I have done and the places I have seen, nothing has tempted me away from the beautiful, maybe unremarkable, and now threatened landscape of my home country. Even now, this country so familiar to me is also strange to me. It still is the only place I want to live. I know that it is strange to my husband, a lifelong farmer and a descendant of generations of farmers. That's the new husband. Anyway. Thank you. Thank you very much. I'm pretty happy about it, too. And now I continue. I know from my father's writing and my daily conversations with both of my parents that they feel the strangeness of it every day, but there we stay. Farmland and farming communities all over this country are in decline or have been swallowed up by our industrial agriculture and economy. In that, we are tragically the same as other rural places all over the United States and the world. A difference here is that the decline in my part of Kentucky can be directly tied to the loss of the Burley Tobacco Program. The program ended in 2004, which gives us 14 years to see what happens to a farm culture when its economy is removed. The Burley Tobacco Program defended a crop that turned out to be indefensible, and so I believe the program and its principles have been quickly forgotten. It was the only farm program, a price support, never a subsidy, that served the people it was supposed to serve, the small family farmers. Because it limited production of a high-value crop, it protected farmers and the farms from overproduction and encouraged a pretty highly diversified farm economy from 1941 until the program ended. For once and for a while, we had a fairly stable farm population that supported the little towns in our part of the country. We had a farm culture of shared work. Differences in political and social issues didn't matter much when our economy was stable, but they now matter absolutely. The community is polarized because we have lost our shared culture. We have all the problems that have been discussed here for the last few days. For years, starting in the late 80s, many of us worked hard to ready our farm communities for the end of the tobacco economy. What would come after tobacco was the question that started meeting after meeting. We hoped that our farmers, and I was one, would benefit from a local food movement that was in full swing. My husband, Steve Smith, and I speak often of our attempts to keep farming without tobacco, which we did successfully on different farms. He started the first CSA in Kentucky, which we thought an historic event that would begin the change we needed. His accounting, shared publicly, proved that a farmer could make more per acre by raising vegetables than could be made on tobacco. He and I talk often of our attempts to keep farming without tobacco, which we did successfully. However, we believed all those years ago that our entrepreneurial work was to keep making farm payments, while we believed, naively it turned out, that there would soon be a local food system that farmers would join. What has happened is that corporations moved faster than farmers could and took over production of organic food. Our mistake was to think that local farmers were necessary to this effort. But the industry didn't need us. They could take care of food production much more cheaply and efficiently by cutting corners on the care of the land, waterways, animals, and communities. I remember with much regret meeting after meeting with my family that my family and I took part in to get farmers to talk about opportunities post-tobacco. I say regret because the rooms were full of farmers. It is much harder to fill a room with farmers now than it was then. And since then, we lead the nation in the loss of farmland. Those meetings were difficult because farmers were scared, and to talk about the end of tobacco was considered heresy. But we did succeed in having some meaningful talk. Many of our local farmers did try local production for local markets, but they soon gave up on a market they didn't understand and didn't trust. And in those days, we began to get some understanding from the health community that to lose these small farmers who were dependent on the tobacco economy would not ultimately benefit the health of our state or our nation. What has come after tobacco? Addiction to drugs and the toxic, erosive production of corn and soybeans. And so, we did not sacrifice our farms and farm communities for health. I must be very careful here to be clear that I am not speaking for tobacco. I am, however, speaking in defense of the program that kept land-conserving communities stable for 63 years and for the people in the land that it protected. Good farming comes from a passion, a calling that must be supported by an economy and a culture that values it. We have had precious little of that understanding in this country. It is hard to find a time in history when people who understood good land use have been valued. My grandfather, John Berry Sr., understood this, and it is his vision on which we founded our work at the Berry Center. He was the principal author of the Burley Tobacco Growers Cooperative. My grandfather did the important work, my father says, and he and his brother just took it up. My brother Den and I have now taken it up along with family, friends, the Berry Center board, and exceptional co-workers. My grandfather was born in 1900 and died in 1991. My 3 daughters were born onto a farm and into a way of life that would not have existed without the work of their great-grandfather. In the years since they were born, my youngest child was born in 1990. That way of life has nearly disappeared. I need to start talking a lot faster. My grandfather remembered his father coming home from the sale of his 1908 tobacco crop with nothing after paying the warehouse fees. He would tell us that he remembered farmers leaving tobacco warehouses with tears running down their faces, and he would say, "I thought then, if I can do something about this, I will." And he did. He understood that the free market would never work for farmers, that they must be protected from their own inability to control production, either because the market is good and they are encouraged, or the market is bad and they are desperate. Why am I telling you about a defunct program that defended an indefensible crop? Because we are desperate for good examples of agrarian thought, and this is one. Because of the loss of the program seemed to mean, in the halls of official agriculture, the loss of the principles of the program. No one is talking about the problem of overproduction, although the countryside is being destroyed by it. Just now in Henry County, 2 farm families have been told that Dean's Milk will, as of the end of May, not be picking up their milk anymore. There is a surplus of milk in the U.S., even a surplus of organic milk. When interviewed about the 100 dairy farm families that are losing their livelihood in Kentucky, the representatives of Extension and state government said that they were reviewing the situation, but offered no actual help. The executive director of the Kentucky Dairy Development Council wrote in the Farmer's Pride, a Kentucky newspaper for farmers, that for the terminated farmers, it may not be profitable to stay in the business. Each producer will need to make that decision for their family and business. In other words, farmers are alone with their troubles, as farmers have nearly always been. A Shelby County Extension agent is quoted in the Sentinel News saying, "The situation, though inevitable, could be seen as a turning point for the dairy industry, but whether for better or for worse is yet to be seen. This is worse than no help. It is cruel. Dean's Food blames Walmart because Walmart has set up its own bottling plant. Neither the head of the Dairy Council or the extension agent are willing to go that far. It isn't Walmart's fault, the extension agent says. They just made the best business decision for them." And so we are to assume that she means that any good business decision justifies the destruction of the land and the people of rural America. Man, it makes me so mad just reading it. Walmart would rather buy milk from one dairy with 5,000 cows than from 100 dairies with 50 cows, even though the health and prosperity of rural America would be far better served by many small dairies than by a single gigantic one. This is a problem in the organic milk business as well. The industry is trying to change organic standards to allow an organic dairy of 30,000 cows to be certified. My grandfather kept on his mind the faces of a few farmers that he was working for. One of the families losing their livelihood because Dean's Food is canceling their contracts is a direct descendant of one of the farmers that my grandfather would name to us, and he is working with us now. His work with the Burley Co-op could and should be replicated to save what is left of the people in Kentucky and who live by farming. Organic Valley, the dairy co-op in Wisconsin, has, in fact, and with success, replicated the work of the Burley Tobacco Program. And they have been helpful to us in our work to establish Home Place Meat, a co-op to support farmers in Henry County, which brings me to our work, which I don't have time to tell you about. Okay, but there are booklets, Debbie says, there. But I am going to say a few things, leaving out, of course, the important things that I should have said. We believe that food is a cultural product, and that to follow my family's example, our work at the Berry Center must include the art and science of farming. Demand for well-raised local products going up has met the rural culture coming down. There are fewer and fewer of us who can recognize what is happening. Only 16% of us live in rural places, and of that percentage, 0.75% farm. It seems to me that our work is to get hold of what is left of the old culture of thrift, husbandry, and neighborliness, and to strengthen it. How can farmers afford to farm well, and how do we become a culture that will support good farming? These may be the most important questions of our time, and yet they are nowhere in the public discourse. Right now, farmers are offered two choices in American agriculture, either small and entrepreneurial or large and industrial, with almost nothing in the middle. And I'm going to stop now. I've said very many meaningful things in these last pages, but I'm going to stop and say that we're trying to put something in the middle. Thank you.
Yeah, so just to say, I don't know if this is on. Just to say, too, yes, there's a back where the bookstore is. If you want to learn more about the programs, the part that Mary couldn't talk about in detail about the Berry Center, we have various literature, and you can sign up and become a member and also learn, receive our newsletters and learn more about what's happening at the Berry Center.
Good job, Debbie.
Okay. Switching gears to the impartial moderator.
I don't understand impartiality. It doesn't make any sense to me.
So you spoke to this a bit, but perhaps you'd want to comment a bit more. You and I often talk about how it's so surprising when you go to especially very urban places and, well, California writ large, where where organic food is everywhere and school gardens are everywhere, and you know, in other urban places like New York, and people must think there's a thriving economy for farmers and for organic farmers. But as we know, that's just not been the place. The paradigm of industrial agriculture is very still front and center, firmly planted in our country. A lot of it has to do with economic globalization. You know, instead of working with, say, organic cotton farmers in California when I lived there, companies found it much cheaper, who had good values that they wanted to have to use organic, but they found it much cheaper to get organic cotton from Turkey or India or places like this. So we're leaving our culture.
Well, I think that even the apologists for conventional agriculture, well, I should say this another way. Anything Walmart wants to call a good business decision it's legal. My friend Wes Jackson talks about the high moral and then what's legal. And it's legal to destroy Eastern Kentucky so that we have cheap energy. Right. It's legal to destroy rural America so that our cheap food policy will continue.
Right. And this term of protectionism, too. I was having a discussion last night with someone about, we talk again about, oh, it's wrong in the free market. We don't want to have protectionism. But that's really absurd because we want to protect the things we care about and we love. And so you then put measures in place so that you can do that, right? The other aspect of maybe to just address is, what's happening for the nanosecond after the presidential election. Everyone wants to know what's happening in rural America. That conversation has kind of stopped, or the interest has a little bit stopped, but we want to keep pushing that. And why does it matter? Why should it matter to the rest of the country what's happening in rural America?
Well, partly because what's happening in rural America got us Donald Trump, in part, anyway. When after the last election, the phone started ringing at the Berry Center. The election would have been a Tuesday. I guess Wednesday morning we knew, and the phone started ringing from people all over the country, wanting to know what in the hell had happened, what was going on in rural Kentucky. And while I was horrified by the election of Donald Trump, I was not at all surprised. But I have been surprised at the anger toward rural America. We've been treated as a sacrifice zone for a long, long time, with our raw materials stolen at the lowest possible price or just stolen. So we've got now, I was thinking about this morning, the country culture that remains, there is still some of it, and we're working with young farmers who are called to farm and who know something about it, and new farmers too. But the economic winners, the children, grandchildren of small farmers, great-grandchildren now, I guess, in rural Kentucky, around where I live, the winners are spending their lives in the power plants up and down the Ohio River. And I'll have to say, they don't understand what's happened to them. And that this has nothing to do with I'm not talking about how bright they are. I'm talking about they're mad at the wrong people. And it's heartbreaking. And what we have, so what we have is a kind of pseudo-country culture of bad music and camouflage and four-wheelers and, it's heartbreaking.
Yeah.
It's heartbreaking.
And as you say, when areas are ignored and really threatened and ripped off over and over again, they're going to go somewhere for some change. Because
well, you can't simply pull an economy out from under people and expect them to
carry on and
act
yeah.
As they should.
Right. Do any of the other panelists have either questions or comments upon what Mary's just spoken about?
I have to visit the center. I need to go.
Yes.
What'd you say? I can't.
She has to visit the center.
Yeah.
Oh, absolutely.
As everyone should.
As everyone should.
You're all welcome
It's only
to
40
Morocco
miles
too.
from here.
Yes.
And you all welcome to Morocco too. It's not that far.
I was just saying, so in Maryland too, and in the Jewish community, there are these young, folks with stars in their eyes who say, "I want to get back to the land." There is a back to the land movement, and you said you're dealing with them. Can you tell us just some things? How are you inspiring them, and how are you helping them economically survive?
We've started something called Home Place Meat, and we're starting with roast veal, which is a product, calf slaughtered right off its mother, or processed, processed right off its mother at 600, 650, not finished at 1,500 pounds. And my coworker, Katie Ellis, has done remarkable work to figure out how to add value and to the product, and to figure out what a parity price is. Do you all know what parity is? Oh, good.
For those who don't, I should say. Yes.
Oh, I thought that was everybody. Well, the simplest definition of parity is that a farmer would get back his or her cost of production and keep something. Right now, corn farmers are selling under the parity price. The subsidies are keeping them going. It's costing more to raise the corn than they can get when they sell it. Soybeans also. This is the story of agriculture, modern agriculture in America.
Let me ask another question, because
I didn't give you a very good answer to the beef program, but you can read about it in our booklet.
I will read about it in your booklet. But there's also, a move in the environmental community to move away from animal products and move to whole foods. I mean, but basically non-animal. How does that affect you?
It makes me mad.
But as an environmentalist who knows...
Well, let me say first that the environmental community has needed to think more about working landscapes than it's ever been willing to do. It's as if the country is separated between the wild places that need to be preserved and our great misused, abandoned countryside that we can do anything we want to with. That's crazy. Now, not that you're crazy.
No, but it is a movement in the environmental community to say we have to reduce our consumption of meat. We have to reduce our consumption of dairy.
I agree. I don't think people need to eat as much meat as they're eating. The product that we're starting with, the co-op has started with, is less meat, better meat, smaller pieces of meat, and not finished at 1,500 pounds on corn, but finished on grass and mother's milk at 600, 650 pounds. I don't think it's possible for farmers in a state like ours to make a living on this marginal landscape without protein. And the average cattle herd size in Kentucky is 27 mother cows. I mean, this is small. They don't enter the feedlot system until they leave our largely organic, perennial pastures. Then they're sold at weaning weight into our nightmare of a food system.
And I think also there's that aspect of, what kind of meat? Again, is it large livestock, unhealthy, CAFOs? Or, so for example, a lot of the emerging soil science is showing that it's absolutely necessary to have manure from cattle and grazing in order to restore the soil matter in the proper way and keep carbon sequestration in the ground instead of going up in the atmosphere, things like that. So it's that holistic, integrated manner that we would work with animals and the whole cycle. That's
My
important.
grandfather, who I spoke about a minute ago, said that the way to make money in Kentucky is grass. It's perennial. It's magic what cows do with it. And it's the best farming left in the state. There's just no question.
Do you want to, we need to be wrapping up, I think, because we, instead of having the interlude we were having, I think what we're going to just be having is probably wrapping up so that we can have the section on the sacred feminine from Florence. But to your question, too, about the farming program that's coming here and that we hope to model is going to be a great help to younger farmers, too. Do you want to talk about that?
We're starting the Wendell Berry farming program in Newcastle, Kentucky, in partnership with a wonderful little college in Vermont called Sterling College. It's in the Northeast Kingdom. Our program will be a program of Sterling College. We will use their accreditation, and we'll have students there their junior and senior years. It's a work college, so they'll be working, so we can use what's left of our culture to educate young people.
That's great.
And Mom says Dad's going to teach. Isn't that right, Mom?
All right. I apologize, we won't have time for questions, but of course you can speak to these ladies afterward. They'll be back in the bookstore, I believe, and gather literature and learn more about this amazing work. Yeah, just to say, the hope really is in that people are looking at this holistic vision. We have to take in, as we say, we know the planet and people and all together, and that's what brings about health and justice and equity to all. So thank you so much for your insights and grace and wisdom on this issue. Thank you all for listening, and we'll end this session. And now have Idona Pucci join us. Yes, let's first end this.